So, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us. I'm very happy to be here, very honored to be here. And I'm here to share with you a story about appreciation, about why I started a movement about appreciation, and what that movement has taught me, what the amazing things that it has taught me. It was a few years ago that I started this movement, and before that, I was just completing my graduate studies, my master's degree in educational psychology. And during that time, I came to learn a little bit about the world and how it's becoming, a little bit more ugly, a little bit worse. And this world that we live in is becoming increasingly neoliberal. And psychology is contributing to that. So I just threw out a word here called neoliberalism. And neoliberalism is a big word. What does it mean? So it's basically this idea that your lives, my life, should be increasingly regulated by this thing called a free market. And in such a neoliberal world, governments, social organizations should be deregulated or minimized. Individuals like you and me become reduced to economic units. And to function efficiently as economic units, right, we need to take self-responsibility. Now, I know it sounds very technical, but bear with me. I'll come to a good point. So, in light of this, psychology then contributes because it focuses a lot about self-responsibility. And under this neoliberal regime, we increasingly don't need our community. That's what it means. Now, here's the challenge. I find a neoliberal regime that we're increasingly living in misses the point about a lot of things. First of all, the free market is never really free. There are people behind the free market that are actors in the free market, and some of them have more power than others. Secondly, if we are to say that we are always and solely responsible for our lives, we are also saying that the rich became rich on their own. And the poor are poor because they're not responsible enough. To me, I reject this. I don't buy this. This is not right. And most tragically, what happens is if we're all self-responsible economic units, then there really isn't no need for community. There really isn't no need for our stories. We don't need to talk to each other. So with that in mind, I was thinking, well, wait a second, this cannot be. And I'm a psychologist. I cannot be a part of this. I cannot be perpetuating this. Something needs to happen. Our stories matter. Our community matter, right? So at that same time, technology was getting, pretty crazy. We increasingly talk to each other in abbreviated spaces in social media. So there remains very few spaces where we can actually reflect and tell our stories because there isn't space. There isn't space in an Insta story, there isn't space in a tweet or a Facebook post, and these opportunities become increasingly compressed. And on top of that, I myself, in my graduate study, felt like I needed an appreciative space. Because as a graduate student, I remembered being criticized all the time. Everything I did wasn't right. Every time I was about to graduate, I didn't graduate. So I thought to myself, we need our stories to be heard, and we need to appreciate each other a little bit more. So it was with neoliberalism, social media, and my own graduate experience that I decided we need a space where we can talk to each other about our stories and appreciate our lives, take stock of our accomplishments, because those things matter. Our stories are the bedrock of our community. So I started this movement called The Best of You. And how I started this is simply by asking people to answer to this very complex question called, who is the best of you? At that time, when I asked this question on social media, I was worried that nobody would understand this question, and nobody would care enough to understand this question, or even answer to this question. Well, thankfully today, those fears have been put to rest because we've so far, 5 years along, received at least 23,000 stories. But what's more important than the number of stories is what stories have taught me in return. An appreciation became a catalyst for our stories, and it's opened up so much more to my life and to the people who worked behind the movement. And I want to share with you these 4 lessons I've learned through the movement. The first one is appreciation provides a space for negativity, a necessary space for negativity. Now, you'd be asking me why. Hey, appreciation is supposed to be a positive thing, right? But guess what? When we receive our stories, the most profound ones tend to begin at a low point. And you know this, because when you're motivated, right, it's normally sparked because, something bad has happened, or you want to remediate something. So it normally starts at a low point, and it goes up. So I want to illustrate this point further with one of our key stories that we've featured on the movement. And that's Patrick. So Patrick never had a good childhood. He came from a broken family. He committed crimes at a very young age. He beat up people. He never did well in school. Right? So that was his low point. And he felt that that was always his trajectory until he met someone who believed in him. And then that's when his life became better. Patrick now gives back to the community. He's a community worker. At the same time, he teaches delinquent students. The point of Patrick's story is that a lot of our motivational stories begin with this structure. The negative part is extremely valuable. And in this day and age, when we are often asked to be positive at the expense of censoring our negative feelings, this reminds us that our authentic experience requires this negative space. The second lesson I want to share with you is that appreciation has helped me take a look at the diversity around us. So it helps me see the things that we don't see, or the things that we refuse to see, or the things that society tells us we shouldn't see. Right? It helps us see those things. And let me share with you the story to illustrate this point. This is Amar. Amar is a deaf dancer. So yes, you heard correctly. He's a deaf dancer. So he has impairments in hearing, but he break dances in a breakdancing group. And he uses some of what he can hear to form the beats. No one else has this experience but Amar. Amar's story let us know that these abilities are not lack of abilities. Rather, these abilities are diverse abilities. And he's helped us see through our own stereotypical lens of disabilities that there is so much more variety in our humanity. Mr. Mohsin is the only editor-in-chief of the only Bangladeshi newspaper in Southeast Asia. And his contribution to our society is to let us see the thousands, the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands Bangladeshi workers within our midst, amongst our midst, that they have contributed significantly to our economy, to our culture, and our society, but yet don't receive the same type of treatment as we do. His newspaper allows us to take a better look at what we should do to be a more inclusive society, to see that there is much more diversity than what we take for granted. So appreciation is powerful because it opens up our sights to these things. Isn't that amazing? The third lesson is this. not only does it open our sights to things that we don't see or we take for granted, it can bring people together. It can unite people. And in an interesting story, Amy and Allison, you see in the background here, is a story we featured last year. And when I was about to feature the story, I was thinking, hey, you know, what is the impact? What will the impact of the story be? I couldn't quite figure it out. Because Amy and Allison's story was just about their friendship. All it was Amy, a Muslim Malay woman, hanging out with a Chinese woman in Malaysia. And the entire story is about how they go and eat, how they go watch a movie, how they spend their time together. In 1 month, it ignited a national conversation on top of a 3 million viewership on YouTube. The national conversation was this: we want this, Malaysia wants this. This is the Malaysia we're looking for. Friendship is the basis of our community. And it brought people together to say, hey, we want this Malaysia back, not the racialized one that we currently live in. So what that taught me was this: appreciation can bring people together. But more than bringing people together, it can bring people together to effect change. And this is the fourth lesson I've learned. And I want to share with you this story. This illustrates my last point. This is Siti Rahayu, and where she is right now is Buku Jalanan Chalkit. For those of you who don't know what Buku Jalanan means, it means mobile library. Chalkit, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, but for those of you who don't, it is the area in metropolitan KL that has the highest level of poverty. Many of the inhabitants in Chalkit are sex workers, refugees, or undocumented workers. And their children do not have access to education for whatever reason. So Siti Rahayu is the founder of Buku Jalanan Chalkit. It's more than a mobile library. It's a street school that teaches them on 2 nights of the week social skills and basic education. The children who do not have access to a school like that so that they can pick up social skills. When we featured this story, it became viral within a month. The videos, we received at least 1 million views within a month. But more than that, it galvanized communities across countries, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, to pour in support for Buku Jalanan Chalkit. From a lack of volunteer teachers, they now have a wait list of volunteer teachers. Medical clinics around the area provided medical support. Soup kitchens provided the children and the families of the children free meals on the nights of their study. And 2 years down the road, they have now moved from the street to a permanent space. So this tells me, and this is what I've learned throughout this movement, that appreciation, the stories that come out when we appreciate other people, can make great changes. So as I end off my talk today, I'm always humbled to be a part of this movement, because as the stories come in, I've learned that the stories are what build our community. They're what humanizes us. So as we walk away in a world that becomes more neoliberal and treats you more like economic units, I want you all to do us all a favor. Take 15 minutes out of your lives to ask yourself this question: who is the best of you? And extend that question out to someone you love or someone who's important to you. Who is the best of you? Because you never know what impact that may have on someone else. And more than that, because our humanity, our lives, and our community depends on it. Thank you.